So we're going to talk today about kids and health and kind of with an athletic, but this is for all kids in that. Some research came out, I mean, just within the last few days. I mean, it's almost brand new. And I think that I had a doctor that lives next to me talk to me the other day about collateral damage to what's going on and are we putting resources toward the collateral damage. And some of the collateral damage is our kids. I mean, what's going on with them emotionally and physically. I just did an interview about 3 weeks ago for the Wall Street Journal. I did another interview for the New York Times. Subject we're going to talk about today is that what are some of the secondary effects of staying at home, not engaging, not being with people. So today our talk is going to be about kids, and we're going to talk about athletes, but kids in general. And so we're going to pull up our slides here in just a second for you. So when we talk about mental health in adolescents, you know, we know before this started, I mean, the second leading cause of death for children was suicide. I mean, it was an issue before this issue. You know, 1/3 of all our children in high school have no friends. I mean, they connect with no friends. I just got done with a great book written by a former attorney general called Together, and he said, everyone asked him, why is he writing a book about Together as Attorney General, which, you know, he had all the health issues in the country, and he said loneliness was the #1 precursor to almost everything that goes on, from poor health habits to again not engaging with people, but also to a lot of our tough issues. That if you feel lonely, you have a tendency to be more aggressive and more negative toward people, and that. And so when we feel alone, when we feel disconnected, our brain defaults to a very survival type of mechanism. And so if we wonder why in this time when maybe an adolescent, you see a change in them and they become more aggressive, or as you talk to them, they are much more sensitive to issues. It's if we feel alone, if we are not connected, if we don't feel part of a group. And so again, it's a great book, and I'll talk about some other great parenting books that we need to go with. So this is the you know, just recent data that came out in that surveyed 3,000 student athletes from around Wisconsin, and found that 65% recorded symptoms of anxiety and 40% being mild, and about 13% severe, while 12% were moderate. You know, they estimate of these three, if we take it in general, that 66,000 kids in Wisconsin, just Wisconsin, have more, or athletes in Wisconsin have more anxiety and depression than they did before this. And we already had really scary numbers. So again, when we've disconnected, because when we disconnect an athlete, I bet all kids, we've disconnected from their group, they've not moved very well, they've not had their discipline, they don't get up as often. So being an athlete is much more than being an athlete. All the things that go along that help us develop skill sets. We learn how to win and lose. We learn how to interact with teams with different perspectives, and that we see somebody fall apart on the field, and we may be a leader, not a leader at times. There's such a massive learning curve. And so again, when we look at athletes, and this was just done, I mean, University of Wisconsin-Madison did a study, and again, you look at those numbers, 65% recorded symptoms of anxiety, with 40% being mild to severe. Again, another 12% moderate. I want you to stick with that number, 65% increase. 66,000 kids in Wisconsin estimate that have increased anxiety and depression. I think, you know, when we look at 68% report symptoms of depression, around, you know, 35% existing mild symptoms and 33% severe symptoms, while we look at or historically, so we look at the COVID and we look at those numbers jumping in that. I think that we as parents, we as coaches, we as just individuals have to, again, think about this as globally as we possibly can. And I think that if kids start to show signs where they appear to be less respectful, they are not engaging in conversations, they get quiet, they end up in a room more. Those are all things, that warning signs that we want to make sure. And I think the trick is not to engage in what we don't like, but how do we really read that? Because the last thing somebody needs when they're struggling is to be yelled at. The last thing they need to be is disciplined. The last thing is what are some of the strategies? And again, we'll talk about that as we go on with the talk today. I think that not surprising, again, if we look at physical activity is decreased by 50%. And I know myself, several coaches have asked, and we've done some videos for kids, and we talked about balance challenge. But even though coaches have tried to engage their kids, 50% decrease in activity by athletes in that. And we can certainly think that probably that goes across the board. All kids have had a decrease in activity. There's a great book out there called Spark, which a FIA teacher in Naperville, Illinois, looked at adding motion to kids, motion FIAD, and it increased their grades, it decreased bullying. Lots of social things were better when kids were moving. And when they're not moving, we see these social aspects fall apart. In fact, when we're not moving, we know that social media has been difficult, that people attack each other on social media. So when we are not engaging, we narrow down attacks to social media. So we really isolate people and really start to feel bad about it. So think about that. 50% decrease in activities, movement activities with kids. So I think that, we know that mental health is, if we look at the World Health Organization, mental health and emotional distress has been an issue that the World Health Organization has said pre-COVID times. It was maybe the #1 issue in the world. We know that cost-wise, mental health is just absolutely astronomical. We saw tons of resources being poured into it. And I want to, not that people are ignoring, but I really feel that when we're talking about the contagiousness and the danger of COVID, we cannot not think about the secondary consequences. And again, those are emotional consequences that are happening. Coaches and parents, athletes themselves, we need to understand this risk. And I think the earlier we can possibly start to intervene, whatever it is, if it's trying to have small groups of kids to get together. There was a study that if a child is on any kind of an electronic device for more than 2 hours a day, it's detrimental to their health. There is a point where if they're not on it all, we know that they can feel isolated, but 2 hours. Well, think about right now when kids have not much to do, where we actually put tapes around playgrounds, we ban kids from getting on fields. We're so sensitive to what could happen to them, again, if they caught the virus, but really being sensitive, what happens if they don't move, if they don't interact. I also think we have to, always weigh everything against a common parameter. So if we're worried about a child being contagious to an older, susceptible person, but that kid also has risk if they are not moving, if they do not happen. You can just spend not much time in the media and you can hear about, from suicides to increased risk factors or behavior or overdoses on drugs or abuse, lots of things happening in that. So I think we, again, need to raise the volume a little bit on what is the total health of a child, because every study out there says that children themselves are a very low risk. This is something that I read a research article that came out probably 15 days ago that said there's really never been something like this at such a low risk to the younger part of the population and such a high risk to such a small part of the population. And we want to protect that part of the population that's high risk. But boy, we have to be careful, not at the expense of our children. And again, how can we come up with a happy medium? But I get concerned when I hear if one person's infected by a child is one too many. But you're really not thinking about the risk to the children itself in that. So again, lots of research came out there. I think in the world without a comorbidity, somebody under 19 has not died. If we look at that in the central Wisconsin, the hospital ministers I'm talking that they haven't had, somebody under the age of 20 enter the hospital because of COVID. So again, it's a low risk population. So again, how do we look at this globally? I think that, so I'm going to talk about some books that I think are wonderful, and all these books are on Audible, so if you're not a reader, you can certainly listen to them. But I'm going to talk to you about the overall so curiosity is the ability to engage, and we know there's time frames. 0 to 12 is a time when kids practice interacting, they practice social skills, they see things. I laugh, my daughter has gotten a new dog, and from the vet to the person she bought it from to everything she reads, they talk about socialization. You have a small window to socialize a dog. We have that same window with kids. So from 0 to 12 is really, really a critical issue. The book talks about, if you're not ready for chaos, you're not ready for kids, because chaos in kids is really curiosity and motion. They're going to touch and smell, and their brain develops. It just lights up when there's challenges. And we do not want to remove those challenges, but we also do not want to remove that kids interact with each other, because in those challenging relationships, I had not so long ago, and a mom helped tell the story, but a 5-year-old said, he's telling me the story, and man, it just got very tears after he got done. But, I went outside, I haven't, played with anybody for a long time. This was early in COVID. And I saw the 5-year-old, my neighbor, my very best friend. I ran to the edge of my yard and said, hello, whatever, his name was. And we're just going to say Tom. Hello, Tom. And Tom ran to the other end of the yard and said, my mom said her germs are the only germs that have love, that your germs could kill me. And he ran in the house. And I think how devastating. So we need to think about how can we, again, keeping kids safe. And again, kids are safe. See, kids, this disease is not, again, healthy kids, they're going to do okay with it and that. So again, we want to be careful with it and certainly want to be safe. But how do we keep curiosity going? How do we make games of curiosity? How do we research it? Because we have to have a plan. Without a plan, the plan is a plan, and we're seeing what's going on. 66,000 children in Wisconsin alone have increased anxiety and depression. Curiosity is one of the greatest tools we can use. So as parents, and I love this book. It's a wonderful book. At the International Positive Psychology Conference, I got a chance to hear this speaker speak. Wonderful things in that. Curiosity between the spouse and the spouses, curiosity about children, curiosity about relationships. If we wake up, and if our kids have something to look forward to every day, they wake up with this insatiable sense that they want to have an adventure. So how do we have those adventures? And the adventures do not take place in a virtual world, meaning I'm playing video games and that. Adventures take place on human-to-human interaction, or discovery and being challenged by a task that is beyond my easy capabilities and are more difficult. If we look at kids even doing math, if math is challenging and we encourage them with challenging, they take those risks. It's way good to see. Next, what we're going to talk about is grit. And Angela Duckworth, which is a great, I had the privilege to talk, and not only talk, but meet with her and spend some time at the airport with her. Just an absolutely amazing person. Her book is gotten acclaim all over the world. But she talks about what are the characteristics, and it's not what we measure kids on. What we measure kids on academically are collecting. And I'm going to jump a little bit here, but a recent study, they interviewed kids and asked, what do you think your parents most want out of you? And it was the ability to achieve. But it was not the ability to survive or be happy. It was the ability to achieve. And so in Angela Duckworth's work, she talks about that we measure grades and we measure goals and we measure performance. But what we really need to talk about is grittiness, is the ability to stay with tasks, and the ability to stay with tasks beyond where you're comfortable. Meaning, if I go for a run, if I quit the minute I feel uncomfortable, I may run 10 or 20 feet. Getting kids to be able to do, again, hard things for longer periods of time than they're comfortable in that. She has a grit scale, which is wonderful. And on her grit scale, she says kids should engage in extracurricular activities. If they start something, you should have them finish it, not drop out of it. Kids that are involved in more than 2 extracurricular activities do better. Kids that move up in those extracurricular activities, meaning that they have some kind of a leadership role that they're, and it doesn't mean they have to have a leadership role in that it has to be defined, but that they're motivators of other kids. And then parents need to do 2 things. Young kids, all they say is, I love to watch you play. And when we get older in that, what we need to talk about is, we love the effort. Oh, I love how hard you ran up there. There is always time to talk about effort. And only so many kids are going to score goals. Only so many kids are going to have spectacular plays. Only so many spectacular plays are going to happen for any kid at that. But effort is something that we can always find something that we saw the joy of playing. And effort can be not in sports, but in coloring and talking to grandpa and grandma and talking to a friend and being creative and coming up with an idea and making something happen. Effort can be in anything, and that we make sure we're picking out those things that bring curiosity out in a kid, bring that grittiness out in a person. That this is, it's called Power of Character Strengths, and so the VA Institute, Values in Action, Character Strengths. It's a wonderful, they have tons of materials in that website that talk about how do we notice what's right in kids and how do we grow it? How do we look at their superpowers? Because often superpowers are what sometimes make us not do well with each other. There was some athletes that I was doing some interactions with. We had some of them were struggling emotionally, and one of the kids that was really struggling, I talked to the dad, the mom, and the child, and the shortly into it, the child that did not in his character strengths, and if you want to, you should go into, understand him better. But in the character strengths, he was not very organized. So he was the kind of kid that would leave the house and maybe, forget a skate in his bag. He would, take the garbage out and it would end up not getting to the garbage bin because he saw something in between that. Should have been the most likable, happy kid in the world. And he was really, really struggling with a bout of depression and that. And when we looked at dad's character strengths, his superpowers were perseverance and bravery. And those were super low on his sons, not perseverance and not bravery. And the dad started crying about 7 minutes into it. And he said, I've tried to make him be me, haven't I? I've thought it was disrespectful when he wasn't organized. And it's just who he is, isn't it? Well, the neat thing, this kid was 14. He sent me a picture about 6 weeks later. It was him skating with a stick above his ice going around the net. And I'm guessing the picture was that he had scored, but he said, I haven't felt this good since I was 10 years old. Thank you, Dr. Bouch. He was being managed to his superpowers, not to his weaknesses in that. So it's a wonderful book. The VA Institute Values in Action have tremendous amounts of websites. Can we move the slide back one? I just want to move back one. If we can move it back, maybe go the other direction. So great. So Angela Duckworth has a website called Character Strengths. And so you can go to that website, Character Strengths. It's made for young kids to adolescents. There are so many great tools on Angela Duckworth's website. So it's called Character Strengths, and you just go into it, just Google that, and you'll find it. And again, it's just, and then she sends out about a once a month newsletter that is just filled with wonderful, interviews and people. And again, I know we're busy. I know we're incredibly busy. But if we do not take the time to help our adolescents and our young children, if something goes wrong, your whole life will be turned upside down. Having seen people for 30 years or more, when a child disappears, when a child becomes addicted, or something bad happens, your life comes to a screeching halt, and it will be the worst thing ever to happen to you in that. It's the little things that we do now that make the biggest difference in that. So when I talk about Character Lab, please take the time to have a plan to do that. When I talk about the VIA Institute, Values in Action, Character Strengths, there's so many great strengths. They're working with over 140 schools to help kids manage this really tough time out there right now. Again, so many good strength in that. If you have a leadership role within schools or coaching in that, again, there's wonderful tools. So the VIA Institute has wonderful tools that if you contacted them or contact me and I'll help you make that contact. Together is a great book. It was written by the former Attorney General of the United States. He talked over and over about the need to together. He said everybody is taught. Asked me, why would I possibly write a book about loneliness when all these diseases that we as that all the team on the Attorney General. That he said, the healing power, and it says in the title of the book, the healing power of human connection in a sometimes lonely world. There was nothing that he thought was more important. So, we have to have a together plan. I mean, he talks a lot in there. Together we're better. And, when we look at the understanding, he uses a great example in his book about there was a young man that came to school that was from a very, very way different kind of thinking as far as it goes, very not complementary to other groups out there in that. And lots of kids shunned him, but a group of kids got together with him, didn't talk about political, but just led with getting together and talking. And this kid, after a couple of years, ended up having a huge impact on moving away from the views that he had been growing up with to views that were much more about getting people together, helping people. But because somebody had the view of getting together, did not leave what they didn't like about this person, led with just understanding who they were and what human they were and what they were able to make a massive change. And so this book is really about, let's make safe emotional environments that people can have good discussions and discussions about disagreements, and that we, that a term has even come out to that we socially erase people, that even in dating that we ghost people, that we do not have the social skills to interact and deal with tough conversations. So again, it's a wonderful book filled with great research out there about together we're better, and how do we make sure, because if we want our kids to survive, they're going to have to be able to emotionally absolutely navigate a world that's becoming more complicated all the time. And if we cannot socially relate to people, it's going to be a really tough long life. And then mindset, which Carol Dweck's book, which is, I think, I mean, almost, if you haven't heard about this as a parent, it's a book that of all the books I talked about, this is the number one. I mean, start here, because mindset is about, I have a fixed or growth mindset. A fixed mindset is when something goes wrong, I catastrophize it. A growth mindset is something went wrong. I wasn't my best today, but I can grow. And what we say to kids from day one on makes a difference where that goes. So interesting enough that we want to compliment our kids all the time. So if I tell a child, oh my gosh, you did great at math when they're 5 or 6 years old, it actually makes them worse at math because they become afraid not to do math that they're not good at. If we tell somebody, oh my gosh, you scored a goal, you got 3 goals, let's go get ice cream, we make it then if they did not score a goal, they had a bad game. And so they start to catastrophize. They're always wrong, they're always bad. And so the words we use are either growing somebody or restricting their growth. And those words, which again, Carol Dweck, it was referenced in by Angela Duckworth and Grit, that one of the things we have to do is think about our words all the time. And if our words are generating competitiveness in children against themselves or others, or we're just talking about the end result, the win result, and that, man, you won the ball game, you scored goals, you are great in math, your art is unbelievable, you were the best person up there on the play, you were the best person. We need to really not do that. We need to talk about, you had great effort, I loved what you did, I love how hard you worked at your math. Not that you're the best kid in math or that you got a great score. They know that in this book and multiple studies, that if a kid that's good at like 3 subjects, but they're bad at say English, and they get a C and they get 3 A's, or get a D in 3 B's, or get all C's and 1 F. If you go to what they're worst at, they actually become worse at other things. So if a kid can learn the joy of math and they're a little better, the joy of, if they're not as good at English, it will pull their English score up. But if we make them work on something that they're not good at, they will actually get worse, because the same learning skill sets that can help them be better at math can give them confidence in English. So it's really the confidence, it's a growth mindset that I will do challenging things. I will be in a safe emotional environment when I'm doing challenging things. And if I fail, I've learned, not that I'm a failure, because again, fail fast and fail forward. Kids have to have resiliency. It's okay to fail. It's not our jobs as parents to be snowplows to make the road safe for our kids. We have to make this road, the kids ready for the road. So the helicoptering, the snow plowing, all the things we talk about. So mindset is really thinking about the words we use. So, reviewing, knowing your child's strengths in that, trying to play to the strengths as far as it goes, understanding what grittiness is and how to develop it. Together we're better. And how do we get those conversations that we can have good conversations, that we can have really good conversations? There's another book out there called Coddling of America, which it talks about how did we move from being absolutely in university systems where we engaged in conversations that were diverse and everybody had a voice, to that if you don't have the voice, I appreciate that, I'm not going to talk to you, cannot talk, that will shut you down, that we can physically injure you, that we've moved from that if words hurt me, I have the right to physically hurt you. Like, we have to move away from that. And so again, in this time of COVID, we're seeing an absolute explosion of all the things that we were already starting to fall apart in kids, already starting to have problems with adolescents, already looking at the things that we're struggling with. So we need to think about it. So we're going to, and we're going to invite all of you next Tuesday. So what is that? August 18th, Tuesday, August 18th, Tuesday. we're going to have a class that we're going to talk just about motion. It'll be on our YouTube page. It'll also be on Facebook Live. And so Bouch Chiropractic Facebook, our YouTube page, you can get to. If you have any trouble, just contact us directly. The number will be at the end of this. Contact us directly. But we're going to really focus on the need for motion in the human brain. We're almost all the studies we're going to talk about are 2020 and forward, and what we found about. We're going to also talk about some of the studies that have been around the brain and COVID and what we're seeing. And we'll start with studies that start from the minute in conception, and how we take care of ourselves emotionally when we're pregnant has a way devastating effect if it's negative on kids as they go on. So it'll be a great class. I hope you can join it. If you have any questions on this, and honestly, if you have a group or you have students or you have coaches or you have athletes and you want us to do a program for you, there's no charge for that, that Zoom program. There's no charge for a short, small program. We'd be glad to do it because, again, we need to have a plan for our young kids to adolescents that help them navigate this world better. And again, we're not doing a good job right now. And again, talking about only the danger of COVID as far as catching the disease, but it's all the collateral damage that's happening to our youth. We need to put, again, a lot of mindset talking about that. So thank you so much for your time today. Again, contact us. We hope this helps. And if you have any feedback, we'd love to. And if you want to hear a topic, just get a hold of us. The number will be at the end.